Welcome back to Her Journey, where we share the most powerful stories of women who turned their darkest moments into their greatest triumphs. Today's story is absolutely incredible. It's about betrayal that cuts deeper than any knife and revenge that's so perfectly orchestrated it'll leave you speechless. This is the story of Maria, a 56-year-old widow who was brutally cast aside by her son, only to discover she had access to power beyond his wildest nightmares. Before we dive into this emotional roller coaster, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss stories like this. Now, let's get into Maria's incredible journey of justice. They say grief changes you. For me, it didn't just change me. It stripped me bare, then rebuilt me, stronger, sharper, and with a purpose I never knew I had. My husband, Arthur, was my world. When he died, I thought my life was over, but it was just beginning. It began the moment my son, the boy I raised, looked me in the eye and told me to get out. He said I had to make myself useful. Oh, I was about to be useful, all right. More useful than he could ever imagine. The house felt like a tomb. 3 days had passed since we'd buried Arthur, and every room echoed with his absence. I wandered through spaces that had once been filled with his laughter, now haunted by silence and the relentless ticking of the grandfather clock, a sound that had never bothered me before but now seemed to mock my solitude. I was in Arthur's study, clutching his favorite coffee mug, when the front door slammed. Heavy footsteps echoed through the foyer, announcing David's arrival. My son had been absent since the funeral, claiming he needed time to process his grief.
Mom.
His voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. "In here, darling," I called back, quickly composing myself. David appeared in the doorway, but this wasn't the grieving son I'd expected. He wore an expensive suit, his hair perfectly styled, and his eyes held something cold and calculating. "We need to talk," he said, settling into the chair across from me with businesslike efficiency. "Of course, sweetheart. I know this is difficult. This isn't about grief, Mom. It's about practicalities. About the future." I blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "Dad's gone, and things are going to change. The business, the expenses, this household, everything. David, we just buried your father. Can't we? Every day of delay costs money. Every day you sit here drowning in sentiment costs money." He leaned forward. "The funeral alone cost more than most people make in a year. Estate taxes will be astronomical. And maintaining this house with you rattling around in it like some ghost. This is my home, David. Our home."
Was.
"It was your home when Dad was alive and paying for everything. But he's not here anymore." The casual cruelty made me recoil. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you can't just sit here for the rest of your life, living off Dad's money, contributing nothing." "Contributing nothing?" The words came out as a whisper. "David, I was married to your father for 32 years. I raised you. I ran this household. You were Dad's wife. That was your job. But Dad's dead now, and being a widow isn't a career." I felt slapped. "How can you say that to me? I'm being realistic. You're 56, healthy, intelligent. There's no reason you can't work." "Work? I haven't worked outside this home in 30 years. I dedicated my life to this family. And now you need to dedicate your life to something else. Because I can't afford to keep you." "Can't afford to keep me?" "David, your father left you everything. Left me responsibility for everything. Do you know what it costs to run Dad's empire? I'm inheriting a job, not a lottery ticket. But surely there's enough. There's enough if we're smart. And being smart means cutting unnecessary expenses." He assessed the room coldly. "This house is too big, too expensive. You don't need all this space." "This is my home," I repeated, voice breaking. "Memories don't pay bills, Mom." He stood, straightening his jacket. I've made my decision. Time for you to become self-sufficient. David, please. I'm still grieving. You can grieve while working. He faced me fully, and I saw a stranger wearing my son's face. Mom, it is either you work or leave. Make yourself useful for once. The words hit like a physical blow. Make myself useful for once. As if 32 years of marriage and motherhood meant nothing. David, I'm your mother. And I'm your reality check. 2 weeks to find a job and somewhere else to live. I'm putting the house on the market. You can't. I can. Everything Dad owned is mine now. And maintaining a household for one grieving woman isn't a sound business decision. After he left, I sat in that chair for hours, staring at the empty doorway. But somewhere in my shock and pain, something else stirred. Not tears, something harder, colder, more dangerous. A quiet, burning indignation that would soon become something much more powerful. I had been useful once. I would be useful again. More useful than David could ever imagine. The next morning I began my search. Not for sympathy, but for opportunity. I dressed carefully and set out into a world I hadn't navigated alone in 30 years. Most job listings required experience I didn't have, but then I saw it. Live-in care required for elderly gentlemen. Excellent compensation for the right candidate. I called immediately. A crisp, professional woman named Mrs. Patterson scheduled an interview for that afternoon at Thorne Manor. The manor sat at the end of a tree-lined drive, a sprawling Georgian mansion that made Arthur's impressive home look modest. Mrs. Patterson, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes, met me at the door. Mrs. Hartwell, I must tell you that Mr. Thorne is very particular. He's seen several candidates, and none have been suitable. What does the position entail? Mr. Thorne is paralyzed from the chest down. He requires assistance with daily activities, medication management, and companionship. The previous carer left suddenly, and Mr. Thorne has been difficult about finding a replacement. She led me through halls lined with priceless artwork to a library that took my breath away. Floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with leather-bound books, sunlight streaming through tall windows. In the center sat a man in a wheelchair. Mr. Silas Thorne was probably 70, with silver hair and aristocratic features. But his eyes captured my attention, sharp, intelligent, piercingly blue. They studied me with microscopic intensity. Mrs. Hartwell, he said, his voice cultured and precise. Mrs. Patterson tells me you're recently widowed. Yes, sir. My husband passed last week. I'm sorry for your loss. How long were you married? 32 years. A substantial investment. And now you're starting over. In a manner of speaking, yes. Tell me, what do you know about caring for a paralyzed man? Very little, but I'm a quick learner and not easily discouraged. Are you squeamish? No, sir. Judgmental? I try not to be. Looking for temporary work while you find something better? I considered carefully. Mr. Thorne, I'm looking for purpose. Something to give my life meaning again. If this position provides that, I'm not looking for something better. He studied me for a long moment. You understand this is live-in? Available around the clock. Yes, sir. £60,000 per year, plus room and board. Sundays off, and I'll provide a car. Acceptable. My heart leaped. Very acceptable. When can you start? Immediately. Good. I must warn you, I'm not easy to work for. I have exacting standards and don't tolerate incompetence or pity. If you're looking for a grateful invalid, you've come to the wrong place. I'm not looking for gratitude, Mr. Thorne. I'm looking for work. He almost smiled. Then we'll get along fine. My quarters were luxurious, a spacious suite with sitting room, bedroom, and private bathroom overlooking formal gardens. As I unpacked my belongings, I tried to process the dramatic change. A week ago, I had been Arthur Hartwell's wife. Now I was Maria Hartwell, live-in carer, starting over at 56. The first morning, I approached his bedroom nervously. I'd researched caring for paralyzed patients, but theory and practice were different. "Come in," his voice called before I could knock. He was already awake in a hospital bed, wearing silk pajamas, silver hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. "Good morning, Mr. Thorne. How did you sleep?" "As well as expected for a man who can't feel half his body. I have a routine, and I don't like deviations." Over the next hour, he guided me through his morning regimen with drill sergeant precision. Medication schedule, exercise routine, grooming requirements, every detail specified and timed. He was demanding but not unreasonable. "You're handling this better than expected," he observed as I helped him transfer to his wheelchair. "What did you expect? Tears, fainting, or fleeing in horror?" The last care lasted 3 days before deciding she couldn't handle my negative attitude. "I don't find your attitude negative, Mr. Thorne. I find it honest. Honesty is a luxury most people can't afford." He maneuvered toward the window. "What did your husband do?"
He was a businessman.
"Owned several manufacturing companies." "Successful?"
Very.
"We lived comfortably. Yet here you are, working as a carer. What happened?" I hesitated. "My husband left everything to our son. My son decided I needed to become self-sufficient."
Ah.
Understanding filled that syllable. "How do you feel about that?" "Betrayed."
Hurt. Angry.
"All reasonable emotions." "Your son's rationale?" "He said I needed to make myself useful for once." Mr. Thorne's hands stilled. "For once?" As if 32 years of marriage and motherhood counted for nothing. "Apparently not. Your son sounds like a fool." "He's my son," I said automatically, though the words felt hollow. Blood relation doesn't excuse cruelty. Some of the most vicious people I've known have been family. There was pain in his tone. "You speak from experience?" "Indeed. My own relatives spend years hoping I'll die so they can inherit my money. They visit occasionally, feigning concern while mentally calculating their inheritance. That must be painful." It was initially. Now it's instructive. It's taught me that family loyalty is often a myth, and true character is revealed in times of crisis. "What do you mean?" "I mean your son's treatment tells me everything about his character. And your decision to rebuild rather than wallow tells me everything about yours." His words sent warmth through me. When had anyone last spoken to me with such respect? "Now, breakfast in the morning room. I'd like you to join me. We have much to discuss." Over breakfast, Mr. Thorne proved a fascinating conversationalist. We discussed books, politics, current events. I found myself relaxing, enjoying intellectual stimulation I'd missed since Arthur's death. "You have an excellent mind," he observed. "It's been sadly underutilized." Arthur appreciated my intelligence. But did he challenge it? Did he engage with your ideas, or simply appreciate that you had them? The question caught me off guard. "I'm not sure I understand." A painting can be appreciated without being understood. A person can be valued for intelligence without their ideas being taken seriously. As days passed, I settled into a routine that was demanding but oddly fulfilling. Mr. Thorne's physical needs were significant, but his mind was razor-sharp. He pushed me intellectually, lending books and engaging in debates about everything from philosophy to politics. "You're wasted as a carer," he told me one afternoon during physiotherapy. "You should be running a company, teaching, or writing." "I'm 56, Mr. Thorne. Bit late for career changes."
Nonsense.
"You're 56, not 96. You have decades of productive life ahead. I have no credentials, no experience except being a wife and mother. Credentials can be earned. Experience can be gained. But intelligence and character, those are gifts that can't be taught. Why do you care what I do with my life? He was quiet for a long moment. Because I see suppressed potential. Because I believe you're capable of great things if given opportunity. And because... He paused, weighing words. Because I knew your husband. I nearly dropped the resistance band. What? Arthur Hartwell. We were friends once. Very close friends. That's impossible. Arthur never mentioned anyone named Silas Thorne. No, he wouldn't have. We had philosophical differences about how to live our lives. We maintained friendship privately, but publicly moved in different circles. I don't understand. Arthur was a public man, community organizations, charity events, business associations. I'm private, preferring solitude. We corresponded regularly through a private business club we both belonged to, but we kept our friendship discreet. Arthur felt our different social circles would create complications if people knew about our connection. He never mentioned you. Not once. I asked him not to. I valued our friendship too much to risk it becoming public knowledge. But why tell me now? Because you deserve to know the truth about your husband. And about your son. What truth? He moved closer. Arthur was deeply concerned about David's character. He wrote frequently about his worries, his fears that David was becoming someone he didn't recognize. Arthur loved David. He was so proud. Love and pride don't preclude concern. Arthur loved his son but was troubled by David's growing entitlement and lack of empathy. He never said anything to me. Arthur was very careful about separating business concerns from family life. He never wanted to worry you with problems that might never materialize. But he wrote to me regularly about his observations of David's character development, especially in the months before his death. Tears threatened. If Arthur was concerned, why leave everything to David? Did he? Mr. Thorne's eyes were sharp. Are you certain about that? David said the lawyers confirmed it. Everything went to him, without conditions. Lawyers tell clients many things. Not all are complete truths. What do you mean? I mean your husband was shrewd. Shrewd men don't leave life's work to someone whose character they question without taking precautions. What precautions? The kind requiring patience to understand. The kind that reveal themselves when the time is right. If you know something about Arthur's will, you need to tell me. I will, but not today. Some revelations require preparation, and you're not ready. Ready for what? Ready to handle the responsibility that comes with knowledge. What responsibility? The responsibility of power. Real power. The kind that can build empires or destroy them. That night, I lay awake, mind racing. Arthur had known Mr. Thorne. Arthur had been concerned about David's character. Arthur had been shrewd enough to take precautions. What had my husband done? What secrets had he kept? And what responsibility was I about to inherit? 3 weeks into my employment, I had settled into a routine that felt almost normal. More importantly, Mr. Thorne treated me as an equal, challenging me intellectually, without condescension. David, meanwhile, had made no effort to contact me, his silence speaking volumes about his character. This morning, Mr. Thorne suddenly stopped during exercises. Mrs. Hartwell, it's time for a serious conversation.
About what?
About your husband, your son, about why you're really here. I set down the resistance bands. What do you mean? You're here because Arthur wanted you to be here. That's impossible. Arthur died before I saw your advertisement. The advertisement was placed 3 days after Arthur's funeral. I had been monitoring the situation, waiting to see how David would handle his grief and newfound responsibilities. When I heard through mutual contacts about your situation, I knew it was time to act. Blood drained from my face. You're saying this was arranged? Arthur and I discussed this possibility many times. He was very concerned about what would happen to you if he died first. Concerned about what? About David's character,
His capacity for cruelty.
his willingness to abandon you when convenient. Arthur never said, "Of course not." He loved you too much to burden you with fears unless necessary. But he wrote extensively about his concerns. Mr. Thorne retrieved a wooden box from his desk. "These are Arthur's letters to me over the past 10 years. With your permission, I'd like to read excerpts." I nodded numbly. He selected a letter. 3 years ago. Silas, I'm increasingly concerned about David's entitlement. He believes my success is his birthright, showing little appreciation for the sacrifices Maria and I made. Another letter. David said when I'm gone, he'll sell the house and invest in his own ventures. When I asked about Maria, he said she could find somewhere smaller, as if she were a tenant rather than my wife. And another. I've decided to take precautions. I can't leave everything to David without safeguards. Maria must be protected, and if David proves to be the man I fear, there must be consequences. I felt sick. Arthur knew. He knew what David would do. He suspected. And he prepared. What preparations? Arthur didn't leave everything to David. He created a trust structure far more complex than your son realizes. What do you mean? Arthur's will contain a hidden codicil. A clause activated only under specific circumstances. What circumstances? If David ever showed extreme disrespect toward you or forced you from your home, a significant portion of his inheritance would be diverted to a trust under your control. That's impossible, David said. David spoke to his lawyers, not Arthur's. Arthur used a different firm for the codicil, one David doesn't know about. How much of his inheritance? 60%. 60%. I whispered. Arthur was specific. If David forced you from your home or treated you with disrespect, he'd lose the majority of his inheritance. The house, primary business assets, investment portfolio, all would go to you. And if he hadn't mistreated me, then he'd have inherited everything as expected. Arthur hoped grief would bring out David's best, but was realistic about the possibility of David revealing his true character. Why didn't Arthur tell me? Because he hoped it would never be necessary. He wanted you to have the choice based on David's actual behavior rather than his fears. I stood abruptly, pacing. This is insane. Arthur secretly gave me control over most of his estate. Arthur loved you enough to protect you from a son who might not deserve protection. But David's already taken possession. He's selling the house, running the business. He's running a business he doesn't legally own. The paperwork gives him apparent control while keeping actual ownership in legal limbo until the codicil is activated. And you're the executor? One of two. Arthur wanted someone David couldn't intimidate or buy off. Who's the other? Arthur's original lawyer, James Morrison. A man of absolute integrity who's been waiting for word from me. Why tell me now? Because I needed to observe you first. To see what kind of woman you really are. To determine whether you'd use this power wisely or vindicatively. And what have you determined? That you're exactly the woman Arthur believed you to be. Strong, intelligent, ethical, capable of great things when given opportunity. But there's more, isn't there? You said dual revelation. Mr. Thorne smiled warmly. Very perceptive. Yes, there is more. What? 3 months ago, I updated my will. I've left everything to you. The words hit like a physical blow.
What?
My entire estate. £200 million, plus properties, investments, business holdings. All goes to you when I die. That's impossible. You barely know me. I know you better than you think. I've been watching, testing, evaluating your character for weeks. More importantly, I've been corresponding with Arthur about you for years. Arthur talked to you about me? Extensively. He told me about your intelligence, kindness, strength. Your volunteer work, love of reading, gift for making people feel valued. He painted a picture of a woman who'd been supporting his success for decades without proper credit. But why leave me your fortune? Because I have no one else worthy of it. My family consists of greedy, shallow people who would waste everything I've built. I believe you'll use the money to do good in the world. I can't possibly accept. You can and will. The will is signed and witnessed. When I die, you'll become one of the wealthiest women in England. When will you die? Sooner than you might expect. The accident that paralyzed me also damaged my internal organs. I have perhaps 6 months, maybe less. 6 months? But you seem so healthy. I'm dying, Mrs. Hartwell. Slowly, but inevitably. That's why I placed that advertisement when I did. I needed to find you, test you, prepare you for what's coming. Prepare me for what? For the responsibility of extraordinary wealth. For the power to reshape your life and others' lives. For the ability to ensure David faces consequences for his choices. I stood again, legs shaking. This is too much. I can't handle this. You don't have to handle it alone. I'm going to teach you everything about managing wealth, wielding power, making decisions that affect thousands of people. But why me? Because qualification and experience don't guarantee integrity. The world is full of people who know how to manage money, but don't know how to value human dignity. Arthur trusted you, and Arthur was the best judge of character I ever knew. I walked to the window, staring without seeing. What exactly are you proposing? Activate Arthur's codicil immediately. David's treatment was clear violation of conditions, and you have legal grounds to claim your inheritance. And then you learn to wield the power you've been given. You decide what to do about David's businesses, debts, future. You choose how to use Arthur's wealth and eventually mine. You're talking about destroying my son's life. I'm talking about allowing your son to face consequences of his choices. He destroyed your life without hesitation. He showed no mercy, compassion, or respect. Why should you show him any? Because he's my son. Being your son didn't stop him from throwing you out. It didn't stop him from telling you to make yourself useful for once. It didn't stop him from treating you like a burden. The words hit home because they were true. David had shown me no mercy, no consideration. He'd been cruel because he thought he could afford to be. What would happen to him? He'd lose control of most business assets. The house would legally belong to you. His lifestyle would change dramatically. Would he be homeless? Penniless?
No.
Arthur wasn't vindictive. David would still inherit enough to live comfortably, but not enough to maintain his current lifestyle without working. And your inheritance would make you wealthy enough to do whatever you choose. You could rebuild your life, start a foundation, travel the world, or simply enjoy security of never being dependent on anyone again. You're asking me to fundamentally alter my son's life. I'm asking you to stop protecting someone who showed you no protection. I'm asking you to claim what your husband wanted you to have. I'm asking you to recognize your own worth. I need time to think. Of course. But don't take too long. Every day you delay is another day David consolidates his position. Another day he profits from wealth that rightfully belongs to you. That night, I sat in my suite, staring at the phone. Part of me wanted to call David, to give him another chance. But I knew it was pointless. David had made his choice, revealed his true character. I thought about Arthur, about the man I'd loved for 32 years. He'd known this day might come. He'd prepared for it, not from malice toward David, but from love for me. And Mr. Thorne, this brilliant, dying man who'd recognized my worth when my own son couldn't, was offering me something I'd never had, true independence. The next morning, I found Mr. Thorne in his study. I've made my decision, I said. And I want to activate the codicil. I want to claim what Arthur meant for me to have. And my inheritance? I'll accept it, with gratitude and determination to use it wisely. Excellent. He smiled warmly. Then let's begin your education. You have much to learn, and I have much to teach. Where do we start? We start with power. How to recognize it, wield it, and use it to reshape the world around you. As he outlined his plans, I felt excitement, not happiness, but the thrill of possibility. David had thought he was discarding a useless woman. Instead, he'd awakened something far more dangerous, a woman who finally understood her own worth. The transformation began immediately. Mr. Thorne didn't just offer wealth. He offered education and power that no university could provide. Every morning, after his physical care, we spent hours in his study while he shared decades of wisdom. Power, he explained, isn't about having money. Any fool can inherit money. Power is understanding how money works, how systems operate, and how to make both serve your purposes. He pulled out leather-bound journals. These contain everything I've learned about business, politics, and human nature. Everything Arthur and I discussed. Everything you'll need to wield your inheritance effectively. Where do we start? With your son's businesses. Tell me everything you know about David's operations. I described what I knew, the manufacturing companies, real estate investments, partnerships Arthur had established. Mr. Thorne made notes, his expression growing serious. David's been busy since Arthur's death. He's moved quickly to consolidate control. Is that bad? It's telling. It suggests he's been planning this, waiting for Arthur to die so he could make changes. Over the following days, Mr. Thorne taught me to research companies, read financial statements, understand complex business relationships. What we discovered was disturbing. David's been selling assets, Mr. Thorne explained, showing me documents his lawyers had obtained. Not unnecessary holdings, but core business components. He's liquidating your husband's empire. Why? Because he wants cash, not responsibility. Arthur built businesses requiring active management, personal attention, long-term thinking. David wants quick profits for his lifestyle. Can he do that legally? Only if he actually owns the businesses, which, as we know, he doesn't. Arthur's codicil was a masterpiece of legal strategy. While David believed he'd inherited everything, actual ownership remained in a trust that could be activated by me under specific circumstances. Arthur's lawyers had been brilliantly careful, creating the appearance of simple inheritance while maintaining complex protections. Your husband was extraordinary, Mr. Thorne said admiringly. He created a structure that would give David every opportunity to prove himself worthy, while ensuring you'd be protected if he failed. And David has failed? Spectacularly. His treatment of you alone would justify activation. But his mismanagement of Arthur's businesses makes it imperative. What do you mean? David's destroying everything Arthur built. He's selling profitable companies to fund his lifestyle, alienating key employees, making decisions that will bankrupt the businesses within 2 years. I felt sick. Arthur worked so hard to build those companies. Which is why he created the codicil. He knew if David proved unworthy, you'd be the only one who could preserve his legacy. But I don't know anything about running businesses. You don't need to run them personally. You need to understand how to hire people who can run them for you, how to evaluate performance, make strategic decisions, build systems that will survive your eventual absence. The education intensified. Mr. Thorne brought in his advisors, lawyers, accountants, business consultants to teach me practical aspects of wealth management. I learned about investment strategies, tax planning, corporate governance, philanthropy. Wealth brings responsibility, he explained. The money you'll control affects thousands of people, employees, customers, suppliers, communities. Your decisions will shape their lives. That's terrifying. Good. It should be. People who aren't terrified by that responsibility shouldn't have it. But alongside business education, Mr. Thorne was teaching me something more fundamental: how to think like someone with power. You've spent your adult life deferring to others, he observed. First to Arthur, then to David. You've been trained to think of yourself as secondary, as someone whose role is to support other people's ambitions. Arthur never made me feel secondary. Arthur loved you, but he also benefited from your willingness to put his needs first. He got to build businesses while you managed everything else. He got to be the public face of success while you handled the private work of making success possible. I chose that life.
Did you?
Or did you accept it because you were never offered alternatives? The question forced me to examine my marriage in new ways. Arthur had been good to me, loving and respectful. But had he ever asked what I wanted to do with my life? Had he ever encouraged me to pursue my own ambitions? I don't know, I admitted. That's going to change. Because now you'll have resources that allow you to do whatever you choose. You'll have power to reshape not just your life, but everyone else's, including David's, especially David's. 3 weeks into my education, Mr. Thorne announced it was time to act. We've delayed long enough. Every day we wait, David consolidates his position further. It's time to activate the codicil. I'm not ready. You're as ready as you'll ever be. And I'm running out of time. His health had been declining visibly. The strong man I'd met was becoming frailer, more dependent on pain medication, more aware of his mortality. How much time do we have? Weeks, not months. Which means we need to move quickly. That afternoon, James Morrison, Arthur's original lawyer, arrived at Thorne Manor. He was a man in his 60s, with gravitas that comes from handling complex legal matters. Mrs. Hartwell, he said, I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances, but I'm glad we're finally able to proceed. I need to understand exactly what will happen when we activate the codicil. David will receive legal notification that his inheritance has been modified due to his violation of the will's conditions. Control of primary business assets will transfer to you, along with the family home and majority of Arthur's investment portfolio. What will David retain? A trust fund providing approximately £50,000 per year for life. Enough to live comfortably, but not enough to maintain his current lifestyle without working. And if he challenges the codicil? He can try, but Arthur's legal framework is airtight. The conditions were clearly stated, and David's actions are well documented. When can we proceed? Immediately, if you're ready. I looked at Mr. Thorne, who nodded encouragingly. I'm ready. Excellent. I'll file the necessary paperwork tomorrow. David will be notified within the week. That evening, Mr. Thorne and I sat in his study, sharing wine as we contemplated what was about to happen. How do you feel? He asked. Terrified. Excited.
Guilty.
Powerful. I paused. Is it wrong that I'm looking forward to David's reaction? It would be wrong if you weren't. He showed you no mercy, no compassion, no respect. He deserves to experience consequences of his choices. What happens after he's notified? He'll be angry, confused, desperate. He'll probably try to contact you, to negotiate, to beg for mercy. And what should I do? Whatever feels right. But remember, you owe him nothing. He made his choice when he threw you out. Now he gets to live with consequences. And your inheritance will be yours within months. £200 million plus properties, investments, business holdings. You'll be one of the most powerful women in England. I don't know if I can handle that much power. You'll learn, and you'll use it wisely, because that's who you are. As I prepared for bed, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. 6 weeks ago, I'd been a discarded widow, told by my son that I needed to make myself useful. Now I was about to become the controller of a vast fortune, with power to reshape my son's life as dramatically as he'd tried to reshape mine. The irony was perfect. David had thought he was getting rid of a burden. Instead, he'd created his own nemesis. Tomorrow, legal papers would be filed. Within a week, David would learn that his cruelty had cost him everything he'd thought he'd inherited. And I would begin to understand what it meant to have real power. The call came at 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. I was helping Mr. Thorne with his routine when his phone rang, and James Morrison's voice filled the room. "It's done," he said simply. "David has been served." My heart skipped. How did he react? According to the process server, he went white as a sheet, then started shouting about fraud and impossible legal challenges. He's demanded an immediate meeting with his lawyers. And they're going to tell him exactly what we expected, that the codicil is legally binding and his inheritance has been modified according to its terms. Mr. Thorne smiled grimly. How long before he tries to contact Maria? I'd estimate within the hour. As if summoned, my phone began ringing. David's name appeared on the screen. "Hello, David. What the hell have you done?" His voice was raw with fury. "I haven't done anything. I've simply allowed the legal process to unfold." Legal process? This is insane. You can't just steal my inheritance. I haven't stolen anything. I've claimed what your father always intended for me to have, under the conditions he specified. What conditions? Dad left everything to me. Your lawyers confirmed what they were told. They weren't told about the codicil because you hadn't violated its terms yet. Codicil? What codicil? The one that specified you would forfeit most of your inheritance if you ever treated me with disrespect or forced me from my home. There was a long silence. That dinner conversation. You're using that against me? I'm not using anything against you. You used it against yourself when you told me to pack my bags and make myself useful for once. I was grieving. I was under stress. Did you put the house on the market? Yes, but did you tell me to find somewhere else to live? I was trying to be practical. Did you sell 3 of your father's companies without consulting anyone? I was trying to streamline. Stop. I held up my hand. Every answer confirms you made deliberate choices. You chose to sell the house. You chose to sell the businesses. You chose to treat me with disrespect. These weren't accidents, they were decisions. But I can change. I can be better. Can you? Or are you just saying that because you're facing consequences? I am better. I've learned from this. What have you learned? That I should have been more respectful. That I should have consulted you. You're missing the point. You should have been respectful because I'm a human being who deserves respect. Not because it might cost you money.
Please, Maria.
I'm begging you. Give me another chance. I gave you every chance for 28 years. When you threw me out, you used up the last of those chances. So that's it? You're just going to let me be destroyed. I'm going to let you rebuild your life the way I had to rebuild mine. You'll have your trust fund, your health, your intelligence. You'll have everything I had when you threw me out, plus £50,000 per year. But what about my house? My cars? My lifestyle? You'll have to adjust your lifestyle to match your income. Most people do. This is revenge.
No, David.
Revenge would be leaving you with nothing. This is justice. I don't believe this. My own mother destroying my life. Your own mother claiming what your father wanted her to have. What he always intended if you proved unworthy of his trust. I hung up and turned to find Mr. Thorne watching me with admiration. How do you feel? He asked. Powerful, I said, surprising myself with the honesty. For the first time in my life, I feel truly powerful. Good, because this is just the beginning. Over the next days, I began understanding the scope of what I'd inherited. Arthur's businesses were more extensive than I'd realized. Manufacturing companies, real estate holdings, investment portfolios worth millions. But more than that, I'd inherited influence, connections, and respect that came with controlling significant resources. James Morrison arranged meetings with Arthur's key employees, the managers who'd been running businesses while David made destructive decisions. They were relieved to learn the companies wouldn't be liquidated. "Mrs. Hartwell," said Michael Chen, Arthur's former right-hand man, "we've all been worried about the direction things were heading." Mr. David had some ambitious plans that would have fundamentally changed the businesses. What kind of plans? He wanted to sell the manufacturing facilities and focus on property development. He said manufacturing was old-fashioned. And what did you think? I thought it was a mistake. The manufacturing businesses are profitable, stable, and employ over 300 people. Property development is risky, speculative, and would have eliminated most jobs. Well, Mr. Chen, you can put those concerns to rest. We'll be preserving the manufacturing businesses and expanding where appropriate. And Mr. David? Mr. David is no longer involved in business operations. The relief on his face was palpable. Similar conversations took place with other key employees. All had been concerned about David's plans, but felt they couldn't speak up. They were grateful Arthur's widow would maintain his vision. But David wasn't giving up easily. He called repeatedly, each conversation more desperate. "Maria, please. You have to understand, I'm in debt. I borrowed money based on my expected inheritance. If I don't have access to the business accounts, I can't pay my creditors." "What kind of debts?" "Personal loans. I bought the new house, cars, took vacations. I thought I could pay for everything once I inherited." "You spent money you didn't have based on money you hadn't inherited yet?" "I was going to inherit it. It should have been mine, but it wasn't yours yet. And now, because of your actions, it never will be. You're going to let me be bankrupted? I'm going to let you experience consequences of your financial decisions, just like you were going to let me experience consequences of being thrown out of my home. But I'm your son, and I was your mother. That didn't stop you from being cruel to me." A week after the papers were served, David appeared at Thorne Manor. Mrs. Patterson informed me he was at the front door, demanding to see me. "Let him in," I said, "but stay close." David looked terrible. His polished appearance was gone, replaced by wrinkled clothes and an unshaven face. His eyes were red-rimmed from stress or drinking. "Maria, thank God. We need to talk." "We can talk, but there's nothing to negotiate. You don't understand. I'm facing bankruptcy. My creditors are calling in loans. I could lose everything. You already have lost everything because of your own choices. One conversation. You're destroying my life over one conversation. I'm allowing you to face consequences of your actions." "What actions?" "I was grieving. I said things I didn't mean." "Did you put the house on the market?" "Yes, but..." "Did you tell me to find somewhere else to live?" "I was trying to be practical." "Did you sell 3 of your father's companies without consulting anyone?" "I was trying to streamline." "Stop. Every answer confirms you made deliberate choices. These weren't accidents, they were decisions." "But I can change. I can be better." "Can you? Or are you just saying that because you're facing consequences?" "Please, Maria. I'm begging you. Give me another chance. I gave you every chance for 28 years. When you threw me out, you used up the last of them. So that's it? You're just going to let me be destroyed. I'm going to let you rebuild your life the way I had to rebuild mine. But what about my house? My cars? You'll have to adjust your lifestyle to match your income. Most people do. This is revenge."
No, David.
"Revenge would be leaving you with nothing. This is justice. You're not the woman I thought you were." "No, I'm not. I'm the woman I was always meant to be. I just never had the opportunity to find out who that was." David left that day, and I never saw him again. But I heard about his struggles, bankruptcy proceedings, loss of his house, dissolution of his marriage. Some part of me felt sorry for him, but a larger part felt justice was finally being served. Mr. Thorne died on a quiet Thursday morning in late autumn. I was reading to him when his breathing simply stopped. There was no struggle, no pain, just the peaceful end of a brilliant man who'd lived on his own terms. I sat with him for a long time, holding his hand and reflecting on his gift. Not just his fortune, but his wisdom, his confidence in my abilities, his belief that I could become something greater than I'd ever imagined. The funeral was small but dignified. A few business associates, his faithful staff, and me. His distant relatives attended, of course, vultures circling what they assumed would be their inheritance, whispering among themselves, calculating shares, planning futures. They had no idea what was coming. 3 days after the funeral, James Morrison called a meeting for the reading of Mr. Thorne's will. The relatives gathered in his law office with barely concealed excitement. I sat quietly in the back, dressed in simple black, looking like exactly what they assumed, a former employee who might receive a small bequest. "Ladies and gentlemen," James began, "I'll read the will in its entirety, but I should mention Mr. Thorne made significant changes to his estate plans in recent months." The relatives exchanged glances. Changes could mean anything. Perhaps more to charity, or restructuring to favor one branch of the family. To my nephew, Charles Thorne, who has visited me exactly 4 times in the past decade, each time to ask for money, I leave my collection of antique fountain pens. Perhaps they will inspire him to write his own success story rather than waiting for others to die. Charles's face flushed red. The fountain pen collection was valuable, but nowhere near what he'd expected. To my niece, Patricia Thorne Williams, who has sent me Christmas cards for 30 years without ever including a personal note, I leave my first edition collection of Jane Austen novels. Perhaps she will learn something about the importance of genuine communication. Patricia's mouth fell open. She'd been expecting millions. To my great-nephew, Robert Thorne, who has been managing my investment portfolio with remarkable incompetence for the past 2 years, I leave exactly what his management has been worth. £10 and a suggestion that he find a new career. Robert stood up angrily. "This is insulting. We're family." "Please sit down, Mr. Thorne," James said calmly. "I'm not finished." The reading continued, each relative receiving a small, pointed bequest that made clear Mr. Thorne's opinion of their character. Finally, James reached the main clause. "And to Mrs. Maria Hartwell, who has shown me more kindness, respect, and genuine care in 3 months than my family has shown in 30 years, I leave the entirety of my remaining estate. This includes all business holdings, investment portfolios, real estate properties, and liquid assets, with a current estimated value of £230 million. The room erupted. Charles jumped to his feet, shouting about fraud and undue influence. Patricia began crying hysterically. Robert demanded to know who I was and what I'd done to bewitch their uncle. I sat calmly through it all, feeling strange detachment. This was what real power felt like, not the frantic scrambling of desperate people, but the quiet confidence of someone who held all the cards. Furthermore, James continued, raising his voice over the chaos, Mr. Thorne anticipated that his relatives might challenge this will. He has therefore provided detailed documentation of his decision-making process, including recordings of conversations with each family member that clearly demonstrate their motives for maintaining contact with him. The relatives fell silent. Recordings meant their mercenary conversations were documented, their true feelings preserved for legal posterity. The will has been reviewed by 3 independent legal experts and found to be completely valid. Mr. Thorne was of sound mind and body when he made these decisions, and he has provided extensive documentation of his reasoning. "Who is she?" Charles demanded, pointing at me. "What did she do to him?" Mrs. Hartwell was Mr. Thorne's carer for his final months, James explained. She provided professional and compassionate care during a difficult period. She's a gold digger. She manipulated a dying man. I finally spoke, my voice calm and clear. Mr. Thorne, I spent 3 months caring for your uncle. I helped him bathe, eat, and move around his home. I read to him, talked with him, and treated him with the respect he deserved. In all that time, not one of you visited him unless you wanted money. That's not true. It is true. And your uncle documented every interaction he had with each of you. He knew exactly why you maintained contact with him, and he structured his will accordingly. We'll contest it, Patricia said through her tears. We'll prove you manipulated him. You're welcome to try, I said. But Mr. Thorne was brilliant, thorough, and completely aware of what he was doing. He wanted his fortune to go to someone who would use it wisely, not to people who would waste it on expensive cars and luxury vacations. We're his family. Family is about more than blood relations. It's about care, respect, and genuine affection. Your uncle died surrounded by people who cared about him. Where were you? They had no answer. The legal challenges began immediately. Charles hired expensive lawyers to contest the will. Patricia claimed I'd used undue influence. Robert insisted his uncle had been mentally incompetent. But Mr. Thorne had prepared for everything. He'd undergone extensive medical and psychological evaluations before changing his will. He'd documented every conversation, every interaction, every decision. His reasoning was clear, his mental capacity unquestionable, his legal framework unassailable. The challenges failed spectacularly. Within 6 months, I was officially the owner of one of the largest private fortunes in England. With both Arthur's and Mr. Thorne's fortunes at my disposal, I now controlled resources most people couldn't imagine. I had businesses to run, investments to manage, and most importantly, I had the power to ensure that David faced the full consequences of his choices. The media attention was intense. Mystery Woman Inherits Fortune appeared in newspapers across the country. But the real story was happening behind the scenes. With my newfound wealth and influence, I began what could only be described as a systematic campaign of justice. I started by quietly purchasing David's debts. When he borrowed money against his expected inheritance, he'd used several different lenders. Through shell companies and intermediaries, I bought every single one of those loans. Then I called them all in simultaneously. Mrs. Hartwell, my new financial advisor, Margaret Chun, reported, "We've successfully acquired all of Mr. David's outstanding debts. The total is approximately £2 million. And his ability to pay? Minimal. With his trust fund of $50,000 per year, he couldn't service these debts even if he spent nothing on living expenses. Excellent. Proceed with collection proceedings." But I didn't stop there. I used my influence to ensure that David's remaining social connections began to dry up. Through careful conversations with the right people, word spread about his treatment of his widowed mother. In polite society, few things are more damaging than being known as someone who abandons family. His country club membership was quietly revoked. His name was removed from charity board positions. Invitations to social events stopped arriving. David found himself increasingly isolated, cut off from the network of connections that had once sustained his lifestyle. "It's remarkable," Margaret observed during one of our weekly meetings. "Mr. David seems to have lost access to every social circle he once moved in. It's almost as if there's been a coordinated effort to ostracize him." "How unfortunate," I replied. "I suppose people don't like associating with someone who treats widows so cruelly." Indeed. And his business prospects have been similarly affected. Several companies have withdrawn job offers, citing concerns about his character and judgment. Well, character does matter in business. But perhaps the most devastating blow came when I arranged for David's ex-wife, Jennifer, to receive a very generous settlement from one of my charitable foundations. She'd been struggling financially since their divorce, and I made sure she had the resources to rebuild her life comfortably. "I want you to know," Jennifer told me during our private meeting, "that I always respected you. David's treatment of you after Arthur's death was unconscionable. I told him so at the time. I appreciate that, Jennifer. And I want you to know that you and the children will always have my support." David was furious when he found out about the foundation grant. He accused me of conspiring with you against him. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him that perhaps if he treated people better, he'd have more allies and fewer enemies." The psychological impact on David was severe. He began drinking heavily, his appearance deteriorated, and he became increasingly paranoid and erratic. He was convinced that I was orchestrating a conspiracy against him, but he couldn't prove it. Everything that happened to him appeared to be the natural result of his own poor choices and damaged reputation. By the end of my first year as a wealthy woman, David's decline had accelerated beyond even my expectations. His attempts to find employment were repeatedly thwarted by his reputation, his financial situation was desperate, and his social isolation was complete. I watched it all with cold satisfaction. This was justice in its purest form. Not revenge, but the natural consequences of cruelty and arrogance finally catching up with someone who'd thought himself immune to them. Mrs. Hartwell, my private investigator, Thomas Reed, reported during one of our monthly meetings, "Mr. David has been forced to move to a small flat in a less desirable part of town. He's been rejected for employment by every company he's approached. His drinking has become a serious problem." "What about his relationship with his children?" "Severely damaged. They've lost respect for him, particularly after learning the truth about how he treated you. Jennifer has been quite open with them about the circumstances of your departure from the family home." "And his mental state?" "Deteriorating. He's become obsessive about what he calls your campaign against him. He spends most of his time writing letters to lawyers, trying to find someone who will help him challenge the will or prove some kind of conspiracy." "Any success?" "None. Every lawyer he's consulted has told him the same thing, that the will is legally ironclad and that his current circumstances are the result of his own actions." How tragic. What made David's situation even more devastating was that he could see exactly what he'd lost. While he was struggling to survive on his trust fund, I was thriving. Arthur's businesses were more profitable than ever under my stewardship. I'd established a major charitable foundation that was making headlines for its innovative programs. I'd become one of the most respected women in the country. The contrast was stark and intentional. David had thrown away everything: wealth, respect, family, future, for the temporary satisfaction of being cruel to a woman he'd seen as powerless. Now he was powerless, while I had become more powerful than he'd ever imagined possible. "Mother," he'd written in one of his many desperate letters, "I know you're behind everything that's happening to me. I don't know how you're doing it, but I know it's you. Please, I'm begging you, call off your dogs. I've learned my lesson. I'm sorry for what I said, for what I did. Please give me another chance." I never responded to these letters. There was nothing to say. David had made his choice when he told me to pack my bags and make myself useful. Now he was experiencing the full weight of that choice, and no amount of begging would change it. The final blow came when David's debts forced him into bankruptcy. The proceedings were public, humiliating, and extensively covered by the media. The man who'd once been Arthur Hartwell's heir was now a cautionary tale about the dangers of entitlement and poor judgment. The bankruptcy hearing was held in a small courtroom, but the media presence was significant. I attended, sitting in the back, watching as David's remaining assets were cataloged and distributed to creditors. He looked broken, aged beyond his years, a shadow of the arrogant man who'd thrown me out of my home. "Mr. Hartwell," the judge said, "your debts total approximately £2 million, while your assets are valued at less than £10,000. This is a substantial shortfall. Your Honor, David's lawyer said, my client was expecting to inherit a significant estate from his father, but circumstances beyond his control have prevented that inheritance from materializing. What kind of circumstances? Family disputes, Your Honor. Legal complications. The judge looked skeptical. Mr. Hartwell, did you incur these debts based on money you had not yet inherited? Yes, Your Honor, but I was assured by my father's lawyers that I would inherit everything. And why didn't that inheritance materialize? David's lawyer looked uncomfortable. There were conditions in the will that my client was unable to meet. What kind of conditions? Respect for his stepmother, Your Honor. The will contained a clause that required my client to treat his father's widow with appropriate respect. And you failed to meet this condition? David's face burned with shame. I made some mistakes in my grief, Your Honor. I said things I shouldn't have said. What kind of things? I asked my stepmother to leave the family home. I told her she needed to find work. And this violated the will's conditions? Yes, Your Honor. So, your current financial situation is the direct result of your own actions? I suppose it is, Your Honor. The judge's expression was stern. Mr. Hartwell, this court deals with many bankruptcy cases, but rarely do we see someone who has so completely authored their own financial ruin through poor judgment and callous behavior. Your debts will be discharged, but I strongly suggest you use this experience to reflect on the importance of treating others with respect and making responsible financial decisions. After the hearing, David approached me in the courthouse hallway. He looked desperate, defeated, utterly broken. Maria, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, please, I need to talk to you. There's nothing to talk about, David. Please. Just 5 minutes. I'm begging you. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a small cafe near the courthouse. He looked terrible, thin, unshaven, wearing a cheap suit that didn't fit properly. This was the man who'd once been so proud, so certain of his superiority. I know you're behind everything that's happened to me, he said without preamble. Am I? The debts being called in simultaneously. The social ostracism. The job rejections. It's too coordinated to be coincidence. Perhaps people simply don't like associating with someone who treats their widowed mother with such cruelty. I made a mistake. I was grieving, I was under stress, I said things I didn't mean. Did you? Because you seemed quite determined to sell the house and throw me out. I thought it was the practical thing to do. Practical for whom? For you, certainly. Not for me. I was wrong. I admit it. I was completely wrong. Yes, you were. So, what happens now? Do you just let me rot? Do you keep destroying my life forever? I'm not destroying your life, David. I'm simply allowing you to experience the consequences of your choices. But I'm your son, and I was your mother. That didn't matter to you when you threw me out. I was different then. I've changed. Have you? Or are you just desperate? He began to cry, right there in the cafe. The proud, arrogant man who'd once dismissed me as useless was sobbing like a child. Please, he whispered. I don't know how to live like this. I don't know how to be poor. I don't know how to be alone. Then you'll learn. The same way I had to learn when you threw me out. But you had money. You had Mr. Thorne's inheritance. I had nothing when you threw me out, David. Nothing but my intelligence, my dignity, and my determination to survive. You have the same things. Use them. I can't. I don't know how. Then you'll figure it out. Or you won't. But either way, it's not my problem anymore. I stood to leave, then paused. David, do you know what the worst part of all this is? What? It didn't have to happen. If you'd treated me with even basic respect, if you'd honored your father's memory by protecting me instead of throwing me away, you'd have inherited everything. You'd be running Arthur's businesses, living in the family home, respected by everyone who knew you. I know, but you chose cruelty instead. You chose to be callous and heartless. And now you're experiencing exactly what it feels like to be on the receiving end of someone else's power. What do you want from me? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to learn that treating people with cruelty costs more than you can afford. I want you to spend the rest of your life remembering that you had everything and threw it away because you couldn't show basic human decency to the woman who raised you. And then what? After I've learned my lesson, then what? Then you live with the choices you made. Just like I had to live with being thrown out of my home by my own son. I left him sitting there, broken and defeated.
It was the last time I ever saw him.
5 years have passed since that conversation in the cafe. I am now 61 years old, and I have built a life that exceeds anything I could have imagined when David threw me out of my home. Arthur's businesses are thriving under my leadership. I've expanded them internationally, created hundreds of new jobs, and established a reputation for ethical business practices that has become the gold standard in our industry. The Hartwell Foundation, funded by both Arthur's and Mr. Thorne's fortunes, has become one of the most influential charitable organizations in the country. I've been featured on magazine covers, invited to speak at international conferences, and honored by universities and humanitarian organizations. I've discovered talents I never knew I possessed and achieved things I never dared to dream of. But perhaps most importantly, I've learned what it means to have real power, not the power to destroy, but the power to build, to create, to lift others up. I've used my wealth and influence to protect other women who find themselves in situations similar to what I once faced. I've created programs for older women re-entering the workforce, established legal funds for women fighting inheritance disputes, and built networks of support for those who've been abandoned by their families. My life has meaning, purpose, and dignity. I wake up every morning excited about the work ahead of me. I'm surrounded by people who respect me, value my opinion, and appreciate my contributions. I have everything I was denied for so long: recognition, influence, and the satisfaction of knowing that my life matters. As for David, I occasionally hear reports about his situation. He's still alive, still living on his trust fund, still struggling with the consequences of his choices. He's never remarried, never rebuilt his social connections, never found meaningful work. He exists in a kind of purgatory, neither successful nor completely destroyed, but permanently diminished.
I feel no pity for him.
He had every opportunity to be a good man, to honor his father's memory, to treat me with the respect I deserved. He chose cruelty instead, and now he lives with the results of that choice. Some people might say I've been too harsh, that I should have forgiven him, that I should have given him another chance. But those people don't understand what it means to be discarded like garbage by your own child. They don't understand the pain of being told you're useless by someone you've loved and supported for decades. I gave David 28 years of chances. I gave him my love, my support, my guidance, and my forgiveness. When he threw me out of my home, he used up the last of those chances. He made his choice, and now he lives with it. But this story isn't really about David. It's about me. It's about a woman who discovered her own strength in the darkest moment of her life. It's about the power of intelligence, dignity, and determination to transform pain into purpose. I am Maria Hartwell, and I am exactly where I belong. I am powerful, respected, and useful, more useful than my son could ever have imagined. I've built an empire from the ashes of my old life, and I've used that empire to make the world a better place. They say living well is the best revenge. But I've learned something better than that. The best revenge is becoming everything you were always meant to be, despite the people who try to keep you down. I am unbroken. I am undefeated. And I am finally, completely, triumphantly free. David thought he was discarding a useless woman. Instead, he awakened a force of nature. And that force has reshaped the world in ways he never could have imagined. This is my story. This is my journey. And this is my victory. And that, my friends, is the power of a woman scorned, who found her strength, her purpose, and her ultimate victory in the most unexpected places. Maria's journey reminds us that even in our darkest moments, there's a light waiting to be ignited, a path to justice waiting to be walked. If Maria's story resonated with you, if you believe in the power of a woman's comeback, then hit that subscribe button, join the Her Journey family, and let's continue to share these incredible tales of resilience and triumph together. Until next time, stay strong, stay true, and remember, your journey is just beginning.